So it's early April, and I'm putting together all of my seeds that I need planted right now. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, it's time to plant potatoes. Now, ideally, I'd like to order seed potatoes from a company that I get my seed potatoes from every year that grow organic seed potatoes. But right now, with everything that's going on, there's a backlog, and I know that if I order now, it's gonna be at least a few weeks before I get them. So, what do? I'm just looked in my pantry and I found some potatoes that we'd bought. They're organic. They're organic potatoes, and these are organic Yukon Gold potatoes that have started to sprout. So, this is what happens around this time of year. For potatoes, if you don't use them right away, this will usually happen, especially with organic potatoes because they want to grow. So I'm going to take these and I'm going to turn them into seed potato cuttings that I can plant and grow potatoes from. So this is what we call an eye. Now, sometimes you'll see much, much smaller ones. That's also an eye, and that's just as viable. It just hasn't swollen and started to root yet. This one is an advanced stage of that, so it's already started to put on roots here. So this is definitely ready to go in the ground. Now, I could plant this whole potato in the ground and it would sprout, but since there's quite a few eyes here, I'm going to see if I can get more than one start from each potato. So I'm going to take a clean knife, make sure that it's clean. This is really important. We don't want to spread any kind of disease or mold or spores of any kind, because then the potato will rot in the ground, and we won't get our potatoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this into two parts with at least two eyes on each segment that I cut. So there's some big things here, and I'm going to cut right down the middle between them, just like this. Now I've got two pieces, and each piece has a couple of eyes on it. This one has quite a few more than a couple, and this one has a big section here that's already rooted and another additional eye. Making sure that your pieces have more than one eye is just a guarantee that something is going to sprout, whereas sometimes one of the eyes will be defective or something will go wrong in the ground, so it's good to have more than one. So they're moist because I just cut them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my seed potatoes out for just a day and let them dry and create sort of a crust. If I put them in the ground now, I could put them in the ground now and they might sprout and be okay, but there's also a higher chance that because they're wet and open that they may just rot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them out on a tray with the cut side up, and I'm going to just let them get kind of a scab over the top, which they will do relatively quickly, and then I need to plan on planting them tomorrow, sometime this time tomorrow, or no later than a couple of days. So what I'm going to do is when these have scabbed over and I'm ready to plant, I'm going to pick a bed with some really nice rich soil in the bottom, at least. It doesn't have to be super deep, even though potatoes are, they're a tuber and they're going to need a lot of space underground to grow their potatoes. What I mean by you don't need a very deep bed is I'm going to plant my potatoes and I'm going to dig down not too deep. We don't want to bury them completely. We don't want them to be too low to the ground or too close to the water table. So I'm going to dig I'm going to dig a hole, place the potato with the sprout up, with the little eye up in the bottom of my bed, and I'm going to dig down so that there's 4 or 5 or 6 inches, probably no more than 6 inches of soil above the potato, and then I'm going to cover them back up. Now the potato is going to sprout out of this eye here, and it's going to root from that, and as it roots, this potato part will rot and die off, but as long as this is alive and well and rooted and happy, that's where your potatoes are going to come from. So it's going to grow a stem and it'll pop up out of the ground. And then the first couple of inches of stem above this root here is where your potatoes are going to form. A lot of people will say, hey, you can keep burying and keep burying and keep burying the stem, and potatoes are going to keep growing on that stem. That's true, but each potato plant only has so much energy in it to produce potatoes. So if you keep burying and keep burying your potato plant, you might get more potatoes, but the same amount of energy is going into all of those potatoes, so what you're going to end up with is smaller potatoes, rather than concentrating that energy into a small space and getting a few larger potatoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant my potato, I'm going to cover it up, I'm going to wait for that sprout to come up in a couple of weeks. Sometimes they're really fast and you start to see them right away, and depending how much you bury them also determines how long it takes them for them to get up there, and the conditions and how warm it is. So sometimes it'll be about a week, sometimes it'll be 2, sometimes a little bit more before those potatoes start sprouting. And once they do, I'm going to make sure to mulch the mound, mulch the area that those potatoes are planted in. And as it grows, I'm just going to mulch and I'm going to cover it. Potatoes really don't like getting weedy. It will suppress their potato production. So I'm going to make sure that I mulch to keep the weed pressure down. I'm also going to mulch to make sure that as those potatoes form on the stem, that they're well covered from the light. Now, as long as the roots of that potato plant are in nice, good, healthy, nutrient-dense soil, a little bit of compost, they're going to take all of those nutrients and that energy and produce those potatoes, even if the material up here isn't soil. So you can cover this area up here on the potato plant with straw or wood chips, or I've got some mixed wood chips and sawdust that I'm going to use, and I'm going to use that to mulch my potato plant at least 6 inches above the soil, so that I'm going to have about 1 foot of depth above where I planted my potato that's covered. And that's so that as the potatoes form, they're not getting light exposure, because light exposure on the growing potatoes will turn them green, and this is a toxin that forms in the potatoes that can make it less digestible and give you kind of a tummy ache. So we don't want that. So that's what I'm going to do with my potatoes. So if you don't have access to seed potatoes, but you've got organic potatoes in your pantry, give them a little bit of time and they'll probably sprout, and then you can plant them. So hope you enjoyed that, and good luck planting.